It is time once again. These weeks just seem to fly by. I just finish a show, and boom, it's time to do another one. Sunrise, sunset. My name's Mischke. Sunrise, sunset. It's like the song from Fiddler on the Roof. Remember that Fiddler on the Roof song? Sunrise, sunset, swiftly fly the years, one season following another, laden with happiness and tears. Well, I'm not talking years, I'm talking weeks. The weeks are flying by, show to show to show. Boom chugga, boom chugga. And another week has gone by. And the show appears once more like the sunrise, rays of incredible light sweeping across the prairie. What have I been doing since last we spoke? Monitoring things at the Vatican. With the passing of the Pope, I've been glued to various websites that claim the death of this Pope, and who exactly will be the next Pope was predicted by Nostradamus. Nostradamus appears once again. Every few years I run into that cat, Nostradamus. You know, I never spend much time researching this fella, but boy, his name comes up a lot. In my life, his name has come up a lot. I mean, the guy's been dead for 600 years. French fella, wasn't he? Lived back in the 1500s? And we still talk about him. You think they're going to be talking about you or I in 600 years? I don't think so. So this Nostradamus guy must be something special. I guess he made all sorts of predictions about the future that have come to pass. This guy could see forward the way historians see backwards. He was not a historian, this Nostradamus, but he was similar. He was similar in that he recorded world events, just in the other direction. Guys would confuse him with a historian, and he'd have to say, no, I go the other way. I go the other way. Nostra-freaking-damus. You say you go the other way? How's that? I study the other direction, my friend. The other direction? What other direction? The road ahead. The many years that lie ahead of us. My uncle, Nostradamus, he was the historian. Professor, actually, at the university. I'm Nostradamus. I go the other way. The other way? Yeah, the other way. I see. Are you a professor of that other way? Nope, the university would not have me. They don't believe in a professor of the other way. They're pretty much the one way. History. Very limited view. But what you gonna do? Interesting. I myself am into history, but as a means of understanding what the future may hold. After all, it was Winston Churchill, I believe, who said that the further you look back, the further you can look ahead. You know what I mean? I would have told him the more Nostradamus you are, the more you can look ahead. Yeah, right. Hey, does knowing the entire future make it kind of boring to then move into the future? Hell yeah. 0 surprises await me. For me, it's like it's already happened. Frankly, I'd rather go to sleep and be awakened when it's all over. My God, shoot me now. My wife keeps trying to have these stupid surprise parties for me, too. Is she an idiot or what? I'm Nostradamus. Do you think Nostradamus would have been as famous? Do you think Nostradamus would have been talked about 600 years later if his name hadn't been Nostradamus? I mean, what if his name was Craig? Anyway, Nostradamus predicted the death of this pope, apparently, and he predicted who the next guy's going to be. And based on my reading of Nostradamus, I think I know who we're going to get for the next pope. I think it's going to be this Peter Turkson fella, the African from Ghana. Mark my words, Nostradamus was no idiot. I think we're going to get Turkson. We got to wait for the smoke, of course. We got to wait for the smoke. When I was a teenager, my mom and I would watch the TV just to stare at the Vatican chimney. White smoke or black, Mom? What are you seeing there? And she'd say, "Can't you see it for yourself, son? We're watching the same screen." And I'd say, "Sure I can see it, Mom, but I'm on LSD. The smoke is purple and pink in my world, so that ain't helping." I used to say to my mother back then, and remember, I was on acid, not purposely, mind you. We had a weird guy in our neighborhood who would sneak LSD into our Orange Crush as a joke. I didn't think it was funny. Anyway, I'd say to my mom, "Instead of smoke, Mom, why not just have someone come out on the papal balcony and yell, 'Hey, we got a guy'? Why the drama with the smoke? Just send someone out to the balcony and have them yell, 'We got a guy!'" I'd have these conversations with my mom, and she'd feel she had to call my dad at the office. "Better come home, honey. I think Tom's been with a neighbor kid again." But I wouldn't shut up. I was on a roll. "Mom, if the Vatican really wants to become more relatable to the masses, they need to update everything. Not only have just some average schnook walk out on the balcony and say, 'We have a guy,' but then have the new pope appear on the balcony as well, saying, 'Hey, I'm the guy. Hi, everybody.' And there the new pope would be, in his polo shirt and khakis, calling himself Pope Steve. Imagine, Mama, if we had a Pope Steve. I can relate to that. I could talk to a guy like that. 'Hi, everyone. My real name is Sergio Paradosoloni, but they said as Pope I could take a new name, and I'm going with Steve. Pope Steve.' People would write songs about him. Pope Steve. Pope Steve. Steve, look out. Here he comes in the Pope Mobile. Steve. And here's the other cool thing, Mom. Pope Steve has a dog, a papal dog. The dog is a St. Bernard. Isn't that perfect? Yeah, he named it Cardinal Fluffenheimer. Yeah. It's going to go with him everywhere. And the St. Bernard has a flask on his collar with a bunch of hooch in it. Pope Steve says there's plenty to share with everyone, and if it runs dry, he'll turn water into more of that holy juice. Kinda cool. Pope Steve. Look out. Pope Steve. Dang. Pope Steve, he's going to rock the Catholic Church like nobody since Pope Whiffenpoof. Remember Pope Whiffenpoof? He was that Polish polka pope back in the early 60s. He was a real cardinal when he was picked, but before that I think he was playing with his band at some VFWs. I don't remember exactly. But Whiffenpoof's dad and Steve's dad were buddies. They were in the same electricians union or something. Anywho... Hey, you guys, I got a story for you. A real story. I want you to sit back and listen to it. I want you to stop what you're doing and listen to it. Perhaps find a balcony of your own somewhere, or a deck, or a place in a park somewhere, or if you can just find yourself by a river. But I have a story for you. And it's one that I think will really throw you for a loop. It threw me. And it's coming to you right after this break.
This is where everything started. I remember I did not understand at the time.
Bradshaw and Bryant, Minnesota personal injury superheroes. Lawyers? Yes, they're lawyers, but superheroes nonetheless, seeking justice for the injured and getting it. Oh, the people they have served, aided, made whole, all the people they have helped, whether it's been domestic violence, car accidents, concert and venue injuries, motorcycle accidents, boating accidents, construction accidents, slip and falls, swimming pool accidents, defective products, catastrophic injury caused by negligence. Bradshaw and Bryan have understood the law, understood what justified compensation is, and the way to get it, and they don't take a dime from you unless they do get it. It's a wonderful way to operate. You have nothing to lose. How often in life can you even say that? Recognized by their peers as the best in Minnesota, Bradshaw and Bryant. Learn more about them at minnesotapersonalinjury.com. Would you like to hear a story, folks? You ready for a little story time? Gather around the campfire. We're up at the lake. Up north. It's late. It's story time. This story was one of my favorite stories when I was on the road doing the Mischke Road Show the last decade or more. My previous podcast was the Mischke Road Show, and this was a story I had stumbled upon during those years. I had run into a man named John, who today would be in his 50s, and he told me of a wild couple of summers when he was a kid, wonderfully, disturbingly wild summers. And this was already my favorite setting for real-life, strange, and unusual North Country tales, up at the lake cabin. Up at the lake cabin. More than that, up at the lake cabin during teenage years. Yeah, it was a story from adolescence, and a story from the cabin, and a story from summertime. You just say adolescence, summertime, and the lake cabin in this part of the United States, and wondrous images just flood the brain. Adolescence, summertime, the lake, perhaps the most magical, weirdly wild, wonderfully mystical time in the life of a North Country kid. Or at least that's how I remember it. That's what it was for me. So this is a story I've always wanted to retell, and now in this new podcast presentation I have here, this latest iteration of me and my well-worn microphone, I have a place to retell it, and it's worth retelling, because it has the great elements of a sitting around the campfire story. My favorite stories of all time are the sitting around the campfire tales from days when I was young. Up at the lake cabin. Summertime. So John told me about this utterly fantastical tale involving the seemingly supernatural, and it didn't matter whether or not I believed him. I knew John believed it. I had no reason to doubt he believed it, hearing the way he told it to me. He said he had always wanted to write it down and present it in some formal way, but every time he had tried to tell the story, he had failed to capture it the way it really was, the way he remembered it. And he never thought anyone would believe him anyway, so he thought, what was the point? Well, I delighted in listening to the story, but I was never going to record the story based on John's telling of it alone. The story involved a couple other people, 3 people actually, but one had since passed away. And I told John, for me to record this very strange story, I would need to track down the other 2 who were still alive. Well, John said he had lost contact with them years and years ago, when he was still a teenager. But he told me he could get me names and where they had lived back when he knew them. So I did some digging, and I was able to find one of them in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And I was able to find one of them in Duluth, Minnesota. I tracked them down, called them up. I asked them if I could drive to where they were and record a conversation with them. Now, the two I found were rather stunned that someone was asking about these unusual events all these years later, but they agreed to talk to me. Joe and Tracy were the names of the other two. I was willing to tell this story once I heard Joe and Tracy corroborate this extraordinary tale of teenagers 40 years earlier. Teenagers who were taken by their parents to their lake cabins in the summer, where what awaited was freedom and time and a desire to find the wild edge of life and to hang out there for a while. For boys, that often meant finding girls. For girls, that often meant finding boys. For boys, it often meant finding danger and finding beer. Maybe the girls wanted danger and beer as well. I never asked them back then what they were looking for, but I sure felt they wanted to feel alive, and I know they wanted to dance on the wild fringe of life. I know that the lake provided the territory, the remarkably fertile territory for teenage adventure. So this story here, this starts when John is in his early teens. He's heading up to the lake cabin, and he's being allowed by his parents to bring a pal. The friend he often brings with him to the lake is Joe, and Joe's along for this ride. So we start here with John's voice. The other voices you will eventually hear will be Tracy and Joe. Again, they were interviewed separately in separate parts of the North Country. The group had not spoken to each other in years and years. They hadn't been together. So you're hearing them from their respective worlds, where I found them.
And as I became a teenager, I would bring friends with. And being teenage boys, we were always on the lookout for girls, and it didn't take us long to figure out that there were a pair of sisters that had a cabin that was 3 doors down. So we met them and started hanging out with them, and we would invite them over because we had campfires on the beach pretty much every night. And so it wasn't too long before they started telling us. I mean, it might have been the first couple of nights they started telling us about this place that was down the road that they said they had gone to with their older cousins when they were younger.
There was a place up the road from us that was abandoned, and me and my cousins went up there. You could see the windows were all boarded up, and you could just see little cracks, and you could look into there, and you could see the old furniture in there. You could see an old rocking chair and rocking horse, like a kid's rocking horse. The place is very old. And in the back, they had the old cellar door. And I remember walking around and opening up that cellar door and looking down. And I remember walking. And as I walked down there, I looked to the right, and you could see that there was a coffin sitting there. And to the right of it was a mound of dirt with a rocking chair on it. And to the left, I remember there was a door, and it was really hard to open. And my cousin's boyfriend at the time opened it up. And this door led to an underground tunnel of some sort that came out on the other side of the woods. At that time, we were really, really scared, but nothing really happened. So as I got older, I tell my friends about this place. It's just really spooky and stuff.
They said they went inside this building in the basement, and there was a coffin with newspaper clippings of a murder. They said there was a tunnel that went underground, and I found it all just pretty much completely unbelievable.
I'd say it was about 14, the first time I went up to John's lake cabin, 14, 15. These were weekends of the summer, kind of magical golden summer days with, our primary concern being, did we bring the right tapes to listen to? Did we bring the Joe Walsh, the Eagles? Were we able to get somebody to buy us smokes or beer? Are there any girls we can chase? These kinds of summer concerns. And then we did happen to meet some girls. There's a story from the girls that there was this house. There were some rumors about a woman who had lived there and some newspaper clippings or something that somebody found when the house was standing, but abandoned, about death, and something bad was written about in the paper.
We had met them one night and we were telling them about this place up here and let's go check it out. And I think that night we decided to go up there and check it out.
We suggested that we wait till it got dark and then we all go down there. So that's what we did. And the first night we just looked around with flashlights and all we could see really was the foundation of the house and the remnants from just the debris from when the house had burned kind of just fallen into the foundation. And it's hard in the darkness with just flashlights to see much more. So we poked around for a little while and we left. And then the next day we went back to look around in the light. And then we could see a lot more. You know, you could see the remnants of an old homestead. There was the remnants of a still and piles of glass bottles and some outbuildings that were collapsed and just the remnants and debris of someone's existence. And that stuff is interesting to me anyway. So it was kind of a draw to keep going back there just because of that. I just think it's neat to poke around that stuff. So we looked around during the daylight for maybe an hour and then we left. And again, that night we went back after it got dark, and only Joe and I had flashlights. So it was me, Tracy, Teresa, and Billy. Tracy and Teresa were the sisters, and Billy was Teresa's friend. And I heard Tracy call out to Joe and say, "Hey, what is this? Bring your light over here."
We were walking around there and I remember tripping over something like a big mound or something. And it was like a fresh grave with a cross on it. We were right there during the day. We knew that was not there.
They looked at something and I heard astonishment, and then they called to me and said, "Come and look at this." So I went over and they were all standing around a freshly made crude grave like you would see in an old Western movie, a mound of dirt 3 feet wide, 6 feet long, with a cross that was made from burnt sticks from the house that laid full length on top of the thing. And we just stood there exclaiming our astonishment for quite a while and trying to make sense of this. Why is this here? What is going on? We had just been there hours earlier in the daylight and this was not there. We could not have been confused. It was 10 feet away from the foundation. Like I said, we had just been there. The thing wasn't there. So I think we probably proposed a few ideas, or I did, just trying to make sense of this. Like maybe we're the victim of a very good practical joker. Maybe someone died in the fire in this place and a relative had come back to mark this spot. Who knows, just anything to try and make sense of what we were seeing.
Billy kicked the cross off of she thought it was creepy that we were would look like a fresh grave. "Oh, that's disrespectful. Don't do that." And then I put it back, and then she kicked it again. And then I kind of got a little irate and ruined my chances with her because she was the one I was most interested in.
We didn't stand around too long. I don't know, 20 minutes or a half an hour just being astonished, and we left. The next day, Joe and I went back, and the grave was not there. Not right where it should be, or anywhere else. We couldn't have been confused on the location of this. There's landmarks all around. There's a foundation of this house. It's like we couldn't have been confused, but the fact that it wasn't there, it made me think, did this really happen?
They came back and they looked really ghostly, like white. The grave is gone. It was there and it disappeared in a matter of 6-8 hours.
It was not 100 feet off the road. It was not with a lot of bushy things that would confuse it. There was a foundation of a house nearby that, the house had fallen into. We could place it. So this grave was gone the next day. There were 5 of us we saw.
This forest has wild ferns. So there's ferns all over the place, and there were ferns growing right where this grave had been. And at one point, Joe walked over and picked one out of the ground, and it had just been stuck there. There were no roots, nothing, just a stem, just stuck in the ground. And there were a couple of those that had just been stuck there. So, and then we started to notice more things like, oh, the soil here is a little darker. It had been disturbed. And it's a pine forest mostly, and there's a layer of pine needles that covers the forest floor, and it looked undisturbed. Basically, a masterful camouflage job had been done. So that's all that happened that weekend. And at that point, there was nothing paranormal or supernatural about this. It was, in my mind, as far as I knew, it's like, okay, well, now we're the victim of like a masterful team of practical jokers. But I could not stop talking about this to everyone I knew. I mean, as a teenager to have something like this happen, I told everyone I knew. It was like probably the most interesting thing that had happened in my life. So that first weekend, all that happened was the grave appearance and disappearance. And then the next weekend, now, of course, we were really drawn to this place. It was a magnet for us now. We had to be poking around down there. So we were all there that next weekend too, the same group, Billy, Teresa, Tracy, Joe, and me. And we're walking around, just poking around, and Teresa kind of jumped and let out a yelp and pointed to a rock or a stick or something and said, that just landed here.
A chunk of the foundation of the house was thrown and hit the ground. Who threw that? Who's here? Well, we go and look, and you could see 200 feet around you. You can see there's nobody hiding.
It wasn't long after that more objects started flying.
Broad daylight,
yes.
It got to about a dozen times that stuff was being thrown. Stuff was flying through the air. But we couldn't see anybody throwing it.
These objects are coming from all directions.
Things floating through the air like sticks and rocks, and having no idea where it's coming from.
Terrifying, fascinating, intriguing. I mean, my experience was like there was a fear, but also an exhilaration. I mean, it was exciting.
I'm surrounded by my best friend, these 3 girls. And so more than fear, it was curiosity. It's daytime too, so it's not scary, really. If there was fear, it was transmuted into an energy of like, wow, this is weird. What's going on here?
His name was Bob. He had no idea what he was doing with his retirement savings plan. He didn't completely understand his IRA, his 401k. He knew how to work, and he knew how to make money, but he did not know how to make his money work. Then he spent 48 minutes with Josh Arnold, and his whole world turned around. He saw the light. He saw his future. He saw that his money could not only work for him, but that all his worries about retirement could be laid to rest. Josh Arnold does that for people, and he has decade after decade after decade. He's the wise old soul of money management. And again, he's offering you 48 minutes of advice for nothing. You really ought to take him up on that. Bob did. Call 952-925-5608. Rewind, listen to it again, get it down, and then get to Josh and tell him where you heard about him.
Investment services offered by Josh Arnold Investment Consultant, LLC, a security and investment advisor. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All investments involve risk. Tommy Mischke is a paid endorser.
American Pressure. They sell and they service industrial pressure washers. And if I am pitching them, you know they're unmatched in this industry, because I am not going to tell people to go to the second best operation in town. If you want to advertise with me, you got to prove you're the best. You got to show me how that's the case. American Pressure passed that test. No small feat, mind you. If you have pressure washers at your job site and you want American Pressure to come on out free of charge, look over your setup, and let you know how they can dramatically improve your life, your business, your day, get a hold of them. Or stop out at their Robbinsdale location, like I did. American Pressure impresses. That's what they do. When it comes to pressure washers, they impress at all levels: parts, service, sales. American Pressure, people, because going to the second best place in town is no way to live your life. Take the pressure off your brain, put it where it belongs, get the peace of mind that comes from calling American Pressure. Learn more at AmericanPressure.com.
It got to about a dozen times that stuff was being thrown. Stuff was flying through the air, but we couldn't see anybody throwing it.
These objects are coming from all directions.
Things floating through the air like sticks and rocks.
Terrifying, fascinating, intriguing. There was a fear, but also an exhilaration. I mean, it was exciting.
More than fear, it was curiosity. It's daytime too, so it's not scary. If there was fear, it was transmuted into an energy of like, wow, this is weird. What's going on here?
What is going on here? That's the question, isn't it? None of these teenagers had a clue. When no one can be seen, when it's daytime, when your sight lines are clear, and when items are coming at you from multiple directions, what is going on indeed? And it wasn't just this visit to the property. This was just the start. I should say at this point that John, the first one of this group that I had met, the one who first told me about this place in northern Wisconsin, he was the only one in this group who had any real interest in this story being told publicly. The two others, Tracy and Joe, were far more reluctant. Joe, in fact, initially wanted nothing to do with it. But that had more to do with not trusting me, not trusting what I was up to. When he came to feel that I could be trusted with this story, with his experience, he participated, allowing me to drive out and record a visit with him. Tracy had her own reasons for being reluctant, reasons that will become clear later on. She did not want to meet me in Duluth, where she lived. She wanted me to drive to her Wisconsin cabin to meet there, at the family cabin where all of this happened. And that's what I did.
As it went along, or we'd keep returning, the stuff just got more intense. Rocks flying from every direction. One time a bottle, the glass just falls above us. We'd walk back to John's cabin, which I would estimate is about 1/8 of a mile, and we'd walk down the road. And these roads are tar roads that are built on the kind of sandy soil, so the edges of the tar kind of crack and break off. Well, those chunks of tar would go, and then we'd turn around and it would come from another direction.
And it was just like a rush, It was like every time we went up there, something else would happen. And you just wanted to experience again, but very afraid too at the same time. But it was just a natural rush to go up there. And just the whole experience, that grave thing was just the start of how weird the place was. I remember seeing sticks just like floating through the air.
In the moment, the moment it's happening, things are being thrown at us, it's frightening. And it's like, I kind of want this to stop. But when we would leave the place, it would stop essentially. And so we had some control kind of over when it happened. So when we would leave, 20 minutes later, the intrigue, the mystery comes up, and it's like, no, I got to see that again. And so it had a strong pull for us to keep going down there. And yeah, I mean, we're studying this thing. This is a crazy mystery. We have to figure this out. We got to see some more of this. I felt like we were studying it. I had thought about actually trying to learn the history of the place. I guess I didn't have an easy way to do that.
Parents and stuff, they didn't really believe us. They just thought us kids just having fun. And
John's dad was not interested in it. I remember telling, like, we saw these rocks fly. It just happened multiple times. We didn't see anybody. And I think his dad's response was, "You want some walleye?"
The activity was much more pronounced when Teresa was around. Then it was really, really off the charts.
John and I would go down there together, and not as much would happen. The experience was intensified by the group energy.
In my memory, it was centered around Teresa. We were sitting in my cabin. I don't think Joe was there. I actually think it was just me and Teresa and Tracy. But there was a deck of cards there, and Teresa said, "Hey, let's play." I forget the name of the game, but it's a game where you draw 2 cards off the deck. You don't look at them. You put them on your forehead face out, and you try and guess what they are. And so she did that, and she got them both right. And I said, that's funny. And then she did the next 2 and got them both right. And she went through the whole deck and got them all right. And so what's going on? I was curious enough where I wanted to experiment with this. So I got some paper and a pen, and I went into the other room, closed the door, and wrote some words on a piece of paper and folded it up so that it was not visible when I came into the room. And I handed it to her, and she put it on her forehead, still folded, so no one could see it. And it took her a while to get it. She had to get each letter, and she was actually starting with the last letter first. She would say the word was today. She would say Y-A-D-O-T. Oh, today. And so it was as if she was seeing through her forehead, because the way the word was, that's why she was going backwards. It was like she was seeing through her forehead, reading this. So I was just, we spent, an hour or 2 that night, me just studying this, going into another room and writing words and having her do this. And then there was something that she didn't like about that attention, because I asked her to do it again later, and she wouldn't do it. There was something that made her feel like different or freakish or something about, she probably had these kinds of things her whole life, but she didn't know that is different or unusual. So she would never do it again. And I asked a few times, and then I just stopped asking because it was clear she didn't want that kind of attention.
Tracy confirmed John's story of her sister Teresa and the playing cards. Though Tracy didn't think of it as that wildly unusual, she too, it turns out, had experiences that revealed her own unique sensitivities. And like her sister Teresa, she wasn't all that comfortable with these abilities, these insights.
I've had premonitions of things happening that happen later on, and just ever since I was little. And I've had multiple experiences. So I think it's John and Joel. I think they got affected more because I've experienced it more than they have. I think I do have some sense that I can see. That scares me a little bit. Premonitions, I'm kind of a little afraid of it. Don't want to really tap into all that.
The first summer came and went for these teens, but the second summer picked up where the first had left off, and the same crew continued to return to their cabins on the weekends. In year 2, the pace of strange activity increased significantly.
We were drinking with the girls around a campfire, and we said, let's just go up there and let's rile this thing up. Let's see if we can cause some trouble. And we were just standing at the edge of the woods, just throwing rocks and screaming and swearing and seeing what we could rile up. I think it got to a point where we were frustrated, and it got to a point where the entity appeared to get more intense, signifying frustration also. The distance that rocks would be thrown was longer. It got really intense.
If we went down there, when we left this place, this stuff would stop happening. Well, it started to follow us. We would go there and provoke this thing, and we would leave, and then the thing started to follow us further and further back. Every time we would go back there, things would be thrown at us further and further down the road, and then it got to the point where it came all the way back to where we had the campfires in front of our cabin. And once it got to that point, well, then it would just hang out there all night with us at the campfire. And so we were sitting there having things thrown at us all night right in front of my cabin.
We had so many different things happen with getting hit in the head with rocks. And I remember getting my hair pulled where it just yanked back, almost went to the ground.
I mean, I got hit in the face with a rock sitting around the campfire. We had logs jump off the fire. There was a little pine tree that's maybe 3 feet tall that just started violently shaking that was 2 feet away from us. I mean, like I said, it was for most of this time exciting. It had a magnetic pull. It was frightening, but had an addictive quality.
When you tell the story, it always gets framed as some kind of ghost because there's a grave involved. I just kind of refused to draw that conclusion. We didn't understand what this was. We didn't want to draw conclusions.
You had to experience it. You had to have seen it.
This thing clearly had some kind of intelligence because my mom, I think we tried to get her to go down there, and I think she walked down there with us, and then nothing would happen. It was like we were down there, all of us as a group, and this stuff is happening. Things are being thrown at us. Things are being moved around. And then this kid comes wandering by, and we start telling him all this stuff like, come in here, check this out. And then nothing would happen. Nothing. He's there for half an hour. Nothing happens. Nothing. He leaves. 30 seconds later, it starts happening again. There were like a couple walking by. We asked them. Whenever we tried to show someone, it wouldn't happen. In my memory, it was centered around Teresa. That's part of the, like I say, the intelligence. I mean, to me, the thing seemed like...
Did any of you ever say, you know what, this is what we got to do? We're being told we're not wanted here, and we are continually disturbing some energy here, and we don't learn the lesson, which is go home.
No, not because of that. There was a point that I came to where, I mean, from our experience, we were just wrapped up in this fascinating mystery, and we couldn't believe it, and we wanted to see more. But there was a point that I came to personally where, okay, I've seen enough. I do not need to see any more of this. I never want to see anything like this again. I never want to have an experience like this again. I have seen enough.
What got you to that point?
This stuff is so hard to believe that you can't believe it 10 minutes after it just happened. That's part of the keep going back and keep going back. Part of it was it had to get knocked into my head. This is real. It took that long. And also the sense of anxiety I had all the time where this stuff was just happening all the time. It's like, okay, I don't need any more proof or evidence And I don't want this in my life. Like, I do not want to live in the world where this stuff can happen. I think it was just a buildup. It was a buildup of all the events. And it also was progressing. I mean, it was we first go there, it would stop. And then it followed further and further back. And then we were getting hit. Girls were getting their hair pulled. So it did seem to have a progression. And it's once you come to the point where it's like, it seems to be getting more aggressive. Where is this going? It got to the point where, like, I was just on edge all the time. I just felt like I had to be ready for the next barrage of things being thrown at us. Just could not relax there.
What was the worst? What was the worst of it?
One night around the campfire on a perfectly still, completely silent night, what sounded like boulders got dropped in the middle of the lake. We'd been having rocks thrown at us all night, which was normal then. But on this completely still night, we hear this kerpoosh. I mean, literally sounded like a boulder. This was not a fish jumping in the middle of the lake. And it was astonishing. And about 20 minutes later, it happened again. I don't know what it was because I couldn't see it, but whatever it was huge. As I said, I mean, this stuff, it's so hard to believe that as a rational being, you try to explain it in a way that makes sense in how we understand the world to the point of irrationality. I mean, you try to explain this to the point of just being completely irrational. Okay, now it's a squad of ninjas that are messing with us. There was such a mass of things that happened that were just completely unbelievable.
So when does this end for you?
As I'd said, I made a decision that I never wanted to see this again. And I just decided I'm not going down there ever again. And I didn't. And Teresa and Tracy had met some college kids that were a little older than us, and they were telling them the things that were happening to us. And they said, we want to go down there, take us down there. So they came and knocked on my door. This was at night. And I think it was sometime in the fall, September, October. And they said, hey, we met these guys and they want you to take them down there. And I said, well, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going down there anymore. So they said, well, at least come out and talk to them. So I came out, walked up the hill. The driveway went up a steep hill. They were standing at the entrance to the driveway on the road. And I can't remember how many, there's 3 or 4 of them. And they were older and they were drinking beers. But I told them the whole story earnestly. And I told them where I had arrived, like, no, I'm not going down there. I'll tell you all about it. And if you want to go, knock yourself out, but I'm not going with you. And to their credit, they said, I think that's something that shouldn't be messed with. And they decided not to go, which to me was astonishing. I mean, drunk college age males do not typically express a lot of hesitation or fear.
I don't know what's weirder. Them doing that, or you guys failing to get an obvious message?
I had never thought of it that way.
You're asking for it. I heard Joe say something along the lines that at one point you guys were kind of taunting this thing, almost pushing it.
Well, actually, we had. I mean, there was beer involved. We were teenagers. When we could get some beer, we would. So there were nights when we had beers and we were like screaming at this thing. But first of all, we have no idea what we're dealing with. So I had never thought of that angle of like, well, this thing's giving us a message.
Really?
It wasn't. Yes.
You never thought of that?
No.
Rocks being thrown at you.
Yes.
Get the hell out of here. Who throws rocks at people?
Right. But this is not a human being. Okay.
No.
This is, so when you're like, yeah, if you went to someone's house and they're throwing rocks at you, then it's clear this was not a human being.
The conclusion of this tale after this break. You know, you take your grandparent, your parent, a spouse, to a place that says they understand memory care, and you assume they understand memory care. But do you know how many families end up pulling their grandparent, their parent, their spouse out of a place that says something like that? That's how the Wellshire in Bloomington and in Medina stays full, because families don't realize how complex memory care can be, and they end up pulling their parent, their grandparent, their spouse out of the place and taking them to the Wellshire. The Wellshire breaks up their facility into 4 different beautifully appointed areas with staff trained to care for people at each of the 4 stages of memory care. Each stage is unique. Each stage calls for different skills. The Wellshire is devoted to memory care and memory care only. That's all they focus on, and they have mastered this. You love your family member suffering with dementia or Alzheimer's. Take them where they'll be loved as well, where they'll be understood, where they'll be cared for by the best Minnesota has to offer, the Wellshire of Bloomington and Medina. They say Yamaha motorcycles rev your heart. They say Kawasaki motorcycles let the good times roll. I say EcoFun Motorsports in Forest Lake does both of those things and more. Yamaha and Kawasaki motorcycles are just the tip of the iceberg at EcoFun Motorsports. ATVs and dirt bikes bring the kids knocking on their doors, and it doesn't stop there. The most incredibly advanced e-bikes ever built bring the rest of the world swarming, because e-bikes are taking over, folks. City riding, country riding, pedaling and getting exercise, or letting electricity do the work for you. The e-bikes at EcoFun Motorsports are about as tempting to steal as anything I've ever seen. But don't steal them and do time in prison. Buy them and enjoy the rest of your life out there in the open air. The most fun anyone can have on wheels is waiting for you at EcoFun Motorsports, Forest Lake. They have a smaller shop in Burnsville, but I say get out to Forest Lake and completely transform what your summer will look like, okay? Tell them Mischke threw you their way. Tell them Mischke threw you right through their plate glass window. Get out there and have fun. Life is short, people. Learn more at ecofunmotorsports.com.
So when you quit going down there, it left you alone.
It's hard to say exactly what happened, because right after I had made that decision to not go there, Teresa was killed in a car accident, and that group it was over, you know. That group of people hanging out in that spot was done.
Teresa was killed in a car accident.
Yeah. Not far from there.
Do you connect in any way Teresa's death to this?
I've wondered about that sometimes, because there was a time when Teresa and Tracy, I came upon them. They were in their driveway, and they said the thing was in their car. They got locked out, and the locks were going up and down. And then I thought that the car that struck them had its lights off. So I don't know. I want to believe that can't happen. Some mysterious force can change physical objects and end people's lives. But I have wondered about it.
Tracy, her sister Teresa, died in a car accident. And her younger brother hung himself. And then after that, I lost touch with Tracy.
Any connection?
It was definitely eerie. The younger brother was not part of the core group, but he knew all about it.
I've taken pictures up there and stuff. There's a picture I had taken up there of my brother and his friend, and there's a face that looks like it's biting my brother's leg.
Just a disembodied head?
Yeah. She was killed in a car accident right on the highway out here.
Just a short distance from here?
Correct. A drunk driver killed her. He had his headlights off.
How long after that did your brother commit suicide?
2 months.
2 months? What do you have to do to deal with that kind of trauma?
I had many nightmares for a long time. I mean, it's definitely hard.
I don't know. I've always had a sense that this story should be told, and I've been unable to do it. And part of that is like I carry these things with me. It shaped my understanding of the world and my being probably in ways I don't even know. To have these things happen that got to the point where it's like, okay, there is no doubt. And so I carry that with me, but you can't talk about this stuff with most people. It's completely unrelatable. There's a few people out there that have had similar experiences that will know immediately that I am telling the truth. But to most people, it can't be true. These things can't have happened. And so it's just it's a really hard thing to share. There are forces operating in the world that we can't know. But, the funny thing is I am a skeptical person. I was skeptical from the start and constantly trying to explain this and figure it out.
You realize the limitations of science and what it can explain. That's what it taught me when I was younger. There's so much mystery in the world as it is that I don't need to think about other worlds. So much mystery.
That was the story I wanted to pass along to you folks. I had not heard anything like it before. I'm not sure if you ever have. But I thought it was worth retelling. And now, let's go to those phones.
Hello?
Is this Sean?
This is. Can I help you?
You certainly can. Guess who this is?
Oh, my goodness. Mischke, how are you?
Good. What am I catching you doing?
Working.
Am I messing with your day?
Nah, it's okay. It was a perfect moment to see my phone light up.
I got a weird question for you. Have you ever had anything happen in your life, in your world, in your environment that you would call supernatural?
Yes. I'm trying to pick one.
The idea that you have multiple options is fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's two that immediately come to mind. One is when my grandmother died, my mom would wake up to the sound of her crying in the middle of the night regularly, and the toilet would flush the same time that she normally would go to the bathroom. And then one Sunday morning, they went to church like they normally do, and when they get home, all the windows are open and pots are boiling on the stove. And that's when they decided to sell the house.
Wow. What were the first things that happened?
My grandmother, while she was living, would go to the bathroom the same time every night, and my mom would hear the toilet flush. She'd hear footsteps in the toilet flush, but there was no one there. And then, like everyone tends to have a distinct laugh or cry, and she would hear my grandmother sobbing. My grandmother was very, very, very sick. She'd hear her sobbing in the middle of the night. And then the climax was the pots on the stove of boiling water and windows open with nobody cooking.
Pots on the stove with boiling water, nobody home, windows open.
Yep.
How did her mother die?
She died of cancer, but she had like multiple amputations. She had mastectomies. So it was a long battle of losing a lot. Before that, I think she lost both arms. She lost a leg. For sure, both breasts.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, you hate to hear of a torturous life like that combined with a torturous afterlife. I mean, what's going on there?
You know, so if one does believe in spirits and there's a lot of people cross-culturally that do. There's a belief that your spirit can get stuck, especially if you die traumatically.
The getting stuck thing is just another thing to worry about. Just when you think you're finally going to be released of this body and free, there's that whole getting stuck thing. And how about you personally? Have you experienced anything of a supernatural quality?
So one of the things that happened is me and my friend were driving down the highway in somewhere in Minnesota in the middle of the night, and it was a remote area, like nobody and no buildings for a long time. Saw two little girls in the middle of the road, middle of winter. So two girl figures in the middle of the road, but there wasn't actually anybody there. And we both screamed really loud and kept on driving.
Why do you assume they weren't standing there?
One, it didn't make logical sense, but it also wasn't like a fully solid person.
I assume they were not dressed for winter either.
Correct, yeah.
What did you guys tell yourselves afterward?
We were just kind of in awe, super freaked out and creeped out by it. And if they were actual little kids there, we would have stopped because clearly they need help and they'll die of hypothermia. But what we were seeing completely didn't make sense to anything else that was happening.
50% of Americans in surveys believe in ghosts. The idea seems to be some ability of another realm to make its presence known in the physical world. That is something 50% of Americans believe, which is a startlingly high percentage. I would argue that a good percentage of people in the U.S. haven't had something like that happen, so they don't have an ability to weigh in based on anything experiential. So
That's a very good point.
Yeah, so we're left with the people who have had an experience and have decided this shows me there is something, and people who have had an experience and have said, nope, I don't care. I'm going to call that a weird blip of the brain. I appreciate you passing that along to me. That's the topic of this particular show, so I'm glad I got a hold of someone who actually could tell me some stories. I'll let you get back to work, but delightful visiting with you.
I hope you have a good day.
Thank you, Sean.
Bye.
Hello?
Hi, Jane. It's Mischke calling.
No way.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there is a way. It involves 10 digits, but there's a way.
Fabulous.
What are you doing?
You know what? I'm with my friend Linda, who works at the funeral home.
Could I speak to Linda just briefly?
I am here.
Linda, have you ever had any supernatural experiences in your life? Situations, things that happened that you couldn't explain that appeared to be or seemed to be of a supernatural nature?
Well, growing up, we had a family card table that would rise that we could not explain.
Are you telling me, in your growing up years, your family routinely experienced a card table levitate?
That's correct. My dad and his sister had that experience, and then my two sisters had it when we were growing up as well.
Did you witness it?
Yes.
When it was levitating, what did you do?
We would ask it questions. It would bob once for yes or twice for no.
Get the hell out of here.
I'm serious. And then at some point, any answers that the table gave to us, we would have it spell it out. 1 bob for A, 2 bobs for B.
What did the family decide was going on here?
We didn't really think about it. It was just always, because it was always there when we were growing up, we just thought it was like a fun, fancy Ouija board.
Did anybody else in the neighborhood ever hear about this and want to experience it?
Yes, my friend Julie and I used it a lot. I was open to weird situations like that.
I can tell you right now, I would have been there every day with a notepad asking all the great questions, the metaphysical, the philosophical questions, the medical questions, all the great scientific questions. It would be years before I would put that notebook away. Where's that card table now?
At my dad's place on the farm.
Is there any way in hell you think that might do that again, the card table?
I think I could get it to rise.
I need to visit this card table.
His name is Arthur.
You guys named the card table?
He spelled out his name to us.
You have got to be kidding me. That is his actual name, and he told you that. Arthur. Arthur the card table.
Arthur the card table.
If I had a card table like that, I'd do a podcast with it. Mischke and Arthur.
Right?
Mischke and the card table. Arthur the card table with Mischke. How far away would I have to go to get to this card table?
250 miles away from the Twin Cities.
It's tempting, especially if you said to me you're pretty sure we could get Arthur to chat with me.
Yes.
I gotta go see Arthur. What are we doing here? I gotta see him. When could we arrange this? Do you guys live in the Twin Cities?
Yes.
I think we should make a trip to see Arthur.
We could do that.
You promise me you're not joking, right?
I am not joking.
This isn't something I'm going to see and say, 250 miles just for this prank?
Nope.
I want to do a road trip to see Arthur, the magic card table. I will tell stories about it. I will make it a centerpiece of my life, the remainder of my days, if anything close to what you're describing happens.
Right.
Wow. All right, now officially you can hand me back to Jane.
Okay, well, it was nice chatting with you.
You too, Linda. Thank you.
Hey, Tommy.
Do you get it now? Do you see why I had to talk to her? Well, let me explain why I knew I needed to talk to her. You are on a show with me here that has been dealing with supernatural topics, the ghost realm. When you said you had a friend who worked at a funeral home, I know enough people who have had supernatural experiences at funeral homes that I instantly needed to talk to her before I asked you about it. So that was my reasoning.
I understand.
But then we went down a whole different road of Arthur, which I didn't see coming. How long have you been friends with Linda?
I met Linda about 5 years ago because when I retired from being a midwife, I started working at the funeral home.
You work at the funeral home now, too?
I did for 3 years. Now I work with nuns, Mischke.
With nuns?
Yeah, with the Sisters of St. Joseph, the radical nuns.
Do they levitate?
No. They're very down to earth.
Sally Field wasn't. I used to see her soar through the sky as a kid.
That was an actress. They really are an incredible group of people.
And for some odd reason, they live a long time. For a long time, there were these nun studies. Why on earth are they living so long?
I would guess because they live in close community with people who they love and who love them.
You know what? And that is what more and more research shows. Community is everything. There are communities that have been studied in this country where they eat terribly, they smoke, they don't get exercise, but they are so tight-knit and so engaged with one another and concerned for each other's well-being and helpful to one another that they end up bypassing these horrible health issues just with this higher level of living that seems to usurp these other issues.
Makes sense to me.
When you worked at the funeral home, what did you do?
Linda's a real funeral director. I was just an employee, so I answered the phones. I did anything like that needed to be done. Nothing special.
Did you ever just sneak downstairs by yourself, go into one of the rooms and just check out one of the guys?
Well, yeah, I've been down in the rooms. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know I have, Mischke.
And were you ever down there just kind of looking more out of curiosity than anything else, just really wanting to see what is this death thing all about, really? What do we got going on here?
Well, no, because I'm of a certain age. I've seen a bit of death myself.
There's death, and then there's basement of a funeral home death.
It was surprisingly very peaceful and calm there, in my opinion.
Will you just ask Linda if in the funeral home itself she ever had, she'll just probably say no and we'll move on, but in the funeral home itself, did she ever have something of a supernatural quality happen?
Linda, in the funeral home itself, was there anything supernatural? No. She says no, and I didn't either in the time that I worked there. I didn't even really feel it. I think if people don't die there, they're just there after they're dead.
But what a convenient place to die, if you could. So many people die in hospitals, and many of them know they're going to die. They're heading to the hospital. You'd think they'd just say to the ambulance driver, take a left up here. The funeral home's that way. Well, are you as intrigued by this whole card table business?
Yes, I was when she first mentioned it to me some time ago. Yes.
I can't believe you've never driven out to the farm.
I will someday.
I think we're all going together.
Okay.
I think we are going to see Arthur. I cannot go to my grave in this lifetime without seeing Arthur. Although I will say, if nothing happens with Arthur, it is going to be one long ride home.
Well, I don't think you'll be disappointed.
Wow, that's great. I love your confidence. This is wonderful. Boy, oh boy. Oh, Arthur, here we come. All right, I'm going to let you go, Jane. I'm so glad you passed along your phone number, and I'm going to stay in touch because this Arthur trip is a real deal.
All right.
You have a wonderful day.
You too.
All right,
Bye-bye.
so long. Well, I think that's going to do it for this show, folks. Another program has come and gone. Sunrise, sunset, swiftly fly the weeks, one show following another. In 7 days I once again speak. Sunrise, sunset, swiftly go the years, one season following another, laden with laughter and tears. You know the funny thing about laughter and tears? They're often placed together in a song, in the lyrics of a song, but rarely are they next to each other in life. You rarely come across a scene where 8 people are crying their eyes out next to 5 people who are laughing their ass off. It's usually one or the other in this world. It would be extraordinary, though, to walk into a bar someday where half the joint is wailing uncontrollably, and the other half are bent over laughing uproariously. You really wouldn't know what to make of it. What happened here, you would wonder, but no one would tell you. No one. You would never know. You'd just have to wonder. You'd have to order a beer and just sit and wonder the rest of your life. What happened just before I walked into this bar? You know, I think that might be a great scene for the start of a film. I would like to write a script where the first scene is someone walking into a bar and half the joint is just shedding tears, just painful crying, and the other half just laughing their ass off. And the bartender's ignoring it all, just serving drinks, and you, the patron, have to figure out what just occurred. Good luck with that. Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset. So long, everybody.